Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Akolona, and this is Nashville. You know the stereotypes around masculinity: toughness, stoicism, strength. Those are some of the expectations for men. Expectations that can be debilitating and outright harmful for men to live up to. But leaders of men's groups are challenging the idea that men are expected to bottle up their emotions and be tough guys in isolation. Men's groups provide opportunities for men to gather and express themselves, to explore their thoughts, and create bonds of brotherhood and support. Later this hour, we'll meet some local leaders of men groups and talk about how they are creating opportunities for fraternity. But first, it's time for At Us. Each week, we take time to read the comments so you don't have to. Yes, I am encouraging you to literally at us on Twitter at This Is Nashville and on Instagram at ThisIsNashville_WPLN. Joining me now with a look back at the past few weeks is our senior producer, Steve Haruch. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Khalil. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, my friend. So what's new?
Well, as I think people are aware, we were off air last week and we got to spend some time out in the community, which was great.
Sure
I had an amazing time at an event in North Nashville that I will be talking more about later. But before that, 2 whole Fridays ago, we had a show about Nashville's ride ecosystem.
Yes, talking about taxis and ride shares.
That's right. And we got a lot of tweets during that show that we weren't able to get to. And I think it's fair to say that there's still a wide range of opinions out there on how rideshares like Uber and Lyft, or Uber and Lyft, as we heard in some archival tape, how those companies have really changed the game here in Nashville.
It really has become a little bit of a hot button issue. Our guest, Samina Globe, said that she's out there driving 12-hour shifts and barely making it. We got a tweet in response from Jessica Woodward Brown, who said, quote, "I so disagree with much of what the rideshare driver and retired taxi driver said. I make my goals / pay my bills for way less than 12 hours, end quote." In another tweet, she added, quote, "And the cab guy knows nothing about how to tell if you have a real app. It's on the driver's phone and on the customer's phone, and there are plenty of rideshare drivers feeding their families. Background checks are required, a clean driving record. He was a grump," end quote. Wow.
I would say a fairly friendly grump, but point taken about the app and how to tell. But I guess comments like that go to show that not every rideshare driver's experience is the same. And like I said, there's a range of feelings out there. So really, really switching gears here, pardon the pun. On Tuesday of this week, we remembered the life of Bishop Marcus Campbell, the North Nashville pastor who dedicated his life to helping teens in need.
Yeah, that was a really special episode, just to be a part of that and to hear about this man and the work that he has done for the community. It was truly, it touched me deeply.
Yeah, it was really powerful. And, we got a chance to sit down with Bishop's widow, Stacy Campbell, after the show. She said that her husband was her everything and that nothing he did happened without her because, as she put it, they were one.
You can really feel that when we sat down to talk with her. And, something that stood out to me was Stacy said, quote, "Oftentimes I would tell him I hated Bishop because I had to share Bishop with everyone all the time. But I loved Marcus because I could have a little bit of quality time with Marcus, but I couldn't have one without the other," end quote.
Yeah. We heard from a lot of folks online who were really moved by the work Bishop Campbell did in the community. And one thing Stacy Campbell wanted to emphasize is that his loved ones are still carrying on that work.
That's right. And they have an upcoming back-to-school backpack giveaway, and they're asking for donations like school supplies and uniforms. They're also looking for volunteers and financial donations as well. The best way to get involved is to contact them via email at mountcarmelnbcnashville@gmail.com. Again, mountcarmelnbcnashville@gmail.com. We'll also put the link to that in Tuesday's episode post. Moving on, yesterday's show was all about zoning.
Yes, it was. And there was a lot of conversation online that we we don't even have time to summarize it here. That includes a pretty robust back and forth over that East Nashville project that we discussed on air. This theme of density and progress versus preserving the vibes in the neighborhood. It's a familiar conversation here in the new Nashville. Short-term rentals also came up again in that online conversation. Warning again to sensitive listeners, this Twitter user's name is a bit much. Bastard Bukowski tweeted, quote, "The zoning/planning commission is a joke. That's why people don't get involved. The commission rubber stamps zoning changes. Let's talk about how zoning changes can bypass short-term rental property permit limits. My neighboring lot changed to SP and has 21 STRP issued permits for one lot."
Wow.
End quote.
That is a lot for one lot. Okay, so the community input started before we even went on air. Okay, as we always do for our Citizen Nashville episodes, we put out a call for questions from the community, and that's how we do it, because when it comes to these type of issues, we want to hear what's on the minds of our fellow Nashvillians. But some folks, they seem to think that we meant we were cutting some corners or something.
Yes, there was some debate about this over on the website, twitter.com. You may have heard of it. The pamphleteer, quote, tweeted our call for zoning questions and added this comment, quote, "This is the type of content you get when 90% of your staff is new to a city, just looking at codes and laws on the books, not even trying to understand an area, its people, or why laws emerged, just criticizing without understanding," end quote. So I'm not sure how asking for questions about zoning is criticizing without understanding. But in any case, this prompted a response from a Twitter user named Ben, who said, quote, "Zoning laws are a major driver of how a city looks and feels and who can live where. They're usually a great way to see what a city actually values," end quote. Then Virgil Hunt jumped into the thread to say, quote, "I don't disagree. My point is that the only people fired up about zoning laws are those that are new to town and don't understand the city," end quote. To which Ben then responded, quote, "I'd argue they understand the city pretty well if they're focused on zoning, and they're fired up because our zoning shows a disconnect between the city we say we are and the city we actually are," end quote.
All right, a respectful exchange on Twitter. The odds of that are kind of like winning the Powerball today. All right, so, or was it Thread, Sky, or Blue Post? Anyway, I heard about that part about, quote, "the staff are new to the city," end quote. And I'm guessing that has something to do with our new producer, Char Dadston.
Yes, Char just moved here from Chicago, and can I just say, we are thrilled to have him.
Very, very thrilled to have him.
So when Char got here, he tweeted, quote, "Hi, Nashville. I'm so excited to be your new This Is Nashville producer. I've got to be honest, though. I'm brand new to the city, and I barely know a soul. So tell me, what are the people, places, events in Nashville you want me to know about?" Now, this got a lot of positive reaction, and he's gotten some really nice invitations to get to know the city better. But as you pointed out, Khalil, there was some negativity also. And Char made the thoughtful observation that the negative reactions to this tweet, and I want to emphasize again, these were far outnumbered by the positive reactions. But these negative reactions reveal what he called a pain point between the old and the new Nashville, which is a big part of why we launched this show, right? To dive into that. And I think, we don't always appreciate what newcomers can add to the city, because I think those of us who have been here a long time sometimes feel like the new Nashville means taking away from what made this place so great. We talked about all this head on in our first episode, but it is definitely a conversation we're going to keep having.
That's right. And that is our senior producer, Steve Haruch. Thanks for this roundup, Steve.
You got it.
And don't you forget to add us on Twitter and Instagram. Let's keep the comments coming. Also, fill out our community survey to let us know what topics you want us to cover at This Is Nashville, old and new Nashville alike. It's super quick and easy, and it helps us produce shows with your needs and interests in mind. We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll learn more about some local men's groups that address manhood and masculinity. Are you currently in a men's group? Have you been a part of one? What was your experience? How was it? Let us know and tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. What does it mean to be a man? How is masculinity expressed? Some men are asking these questions in order to find a path that veers from the more traditional definitions of manhood, definitions that can be harmful and isolating. But where can men go to talk about what they are going through? Where can they find others who will offer guidance and support? The answer? Men's groups. Men's groups offer an opportunity for men to share their stories and to find the tools to be the type of man they want to be. My next guest is a leader of a local men's group. Joseph Boozley is the founder and creator of Men IQ, a local men's group. Joseph, thanks for being here and welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thanks, Khalil. Thanks for having me.
So tell me more about Men IQ. What's the focus of the group?
So Men IQ stands for Men of High Integrity and Quality, and the focus is cultivating a sense of self-awareness and emotional intelligence in men, particularly to really provide more conflict resolution skills in the home, right? We definitely find that in our community, the community we serve, which is primarily Black men, the major epidemic, I guess, that's going unresolved is fatherless homes. And that primarily comes from an inability to resolve conflict and an inability to recognize your own emotional experience.
What are the gatherings like?
So many types. We do retreats. That's probably the biggest and most intensive, like immersion experience. But we also do a monthly hike. We do a monthly hike for wellness. We call it Moving with Mindfulness. And we started with a panel after we did our youth program and realized we need to spend more time focusing on adult men. Like, we focus on young men, right, in America a lot. But after they reach the age of 18, sometimes even 21, there's not a lot of continuing support for men. And so it's like there's a gap here, right? The 20s is an intense time to navigate. New fatherhood, new marriage, intense time to navigate. And so our gatherings start with the hike. We also do panels where we talk to men that have navigated this experience and can speak from it, not from particularly a space of expertise, but a general, genuine vulnerability about what they've learned as a father, what they've learned as a husband, and what they've learned even through their stumbles. So
it's interesting what you said about, working with the youth as opposed to working with adult men. I mean, a lot of people would argue you don't really become an adult until you're 26, 25, 26, when your frontal lobe is finished. There's a difference between, having worked with young people, difference between an 18-year-old and a 27-year-old when it comes to that. But I'm interested in the moment where you recognize that this is something you wanted to do and get started.
Well, great question there. So in college, actually, I love working with young men because I didn't have a lot of men in my life. I had a father, loved him, but he didn't live in the home. And so when I would visit my cousins, my mom would often send me to visit my cousins in Queens. They were 4 brothers. And so it was me, my mom, my sister, my aunt, sometimes my grandma. I go to my dad's house. It was my dad, my stepmom, my 3 stepsisters. I'm like, man, but 1 to 2 weekends a month, I'd visit my cousins. And I'm like, man, brotherhood, man, just being a guy. And so when I started at college at Fisk University, there was a brother named Isaac Thompson, amazing mentor of mine, ran a youth program called the Thrust Math and Science Program. And it started with the all-boys summer camp. And so that's really where I started back in 2008, just being a counselor, being a mentor there. And then as I transitioned out of university, I became the director. And then in 2020, in the dawn of the epidemic, we saw like, okay, a lot of people don't have anything to do. And actually, me and my wife, we had conceived. And so as I'm getting ready to become a father, I'm like, I don't feel ready. I'm like, okay, wait a second. I've done the military. I've done a couple of fraternities. I've done all types of things for personal and professional development. And I felt completely unprepared for fatherhood. And so that whole 9-month period of anticipating becoming a father, I was just interviewing men. I was just talking to men I knew, upstanding good men that had worked together with their wives or even working together with their co-parent in a healthy way. And I'm like, do you got any tips? And I realized at the end of that journey, I was like, there's a lot of guys like me that are terrified about becoming a father, that highly underprepared, but they don't even have the village network that I had to ask these men. And so like this is a need, right? And so just started an initiative, no major goals in sight, just to open the conversation up and see who wanted to speak with other men and learn from each other.
My next guest is also a leader of a local men's group. Jimmy Addison is the organizer of Conscious Men's Circle Nashville. Jimmy, welcome, and thanks for being with us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
How did you come to work with men's groups?
I went through a whole personal and transpersonal and spiritual journey myself. After therapy, I realized I was a codependent, and I was in band therapy. I was traveling as a musician in Los Angeles, and went down this whole spiritual journey, which is where I met my wife, who had been doing conscious work for a really long time. So she and I left during the pandemic. We traveled all across the world in different communities in Ibiza, Spain, and Austin, Texas, and Boulder, Colorado, and Costa Rica, doing a lot of workshops. And I just found that I was drawn to men's work. It's been my background as a kid, growing up in a church group called Royal Ambassadors, with my dad as like a counselor. And so, yeah, my qualifications are just the school of hard knocks, just like working through it and seeing a need.
So tell me more about Conscious Men's Circle. What are the meetings like?
Yeah, so we host a variety of physical and mental activities that are healthy for men. And what that looks like, for about the first hour and a half, we'll do a physical activity. Doesn't matter your level of athleticism. It's about how you relate to the spirit of competition, how you relate to that journey yourself. And then we'll sit in circle and we'll host a variety of prompts. We'll ask questions like, what kind of masks do you wear and as a man? And what consequence does that have in your life? How does that show up for you? So we'll do that, and we usually have a new guest every time. We'll lead people through breathwork exercises, also all sorts of things. So it's a variety of different things, usually centered around a very specific theme each month.
Now, something that's interesting to me is that you start off with physical activities. And that reminds me of when I was a teacher teaching elementary school. We all remember elementary school. You're out there on the yard running around having fun. The bell rings, you line up and you go to class. When my students would come to class, the boys would still be bouncing off of the walls. All the girls ready to learn and get through the lesson. My remedy, I send the boys back out. 15 more minutes, run around, be crazy. They came back in tired, huffing and puffing, but they were calm. They were ready to listen, and they were ready to learn.
Absolutely. Focused.
Focused,
That's
it is.
it.
You know, tell me about your travels as you explored masculinity and what it means to be a man. You know, you mentioned some of the places that you went. What did you find where you were out there?
Well, Conscious Community is a global community, really, and there are all these hubs all across the world. Austin, Texas has a big one, Boulder, Colorado in this country, Topanga Canyon, California, but also they're in Bali, and they're in Ibiza, Spain, and they're in Costa Rica. And what Conscious Community really is that I found is a consent-forward culture. It's creating a culture around understanding and having a self-awareness and clarity of your desires, your boundaries, and being able to communicate those with other people. So I saw a lot of women and men doing this work, but I was really gravitating and drawn towards the men that were doing this work. There are national groups out there like Sacred Sons and other groups that are really doing deep transpersonal and spiritual work. And I had the opportunity to attend a lot of workshops, like in Costa Rica. We spent a good deal of time there. I'm a new father, of a beautiful boy. His name's Rio. He's a year and a half, and I got another one on the way.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. So I feel inherently drawn to this kind of work because it's important to see how I show up for my son in this world. And I want to include more people in this. One of the things I love about Nashville is there's no cool kids club in Nashville. You know, you go to other cities and spirituality can be kind of a cliquey thing, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I love about Nashville is it's such an inclusive environment, and I want to celebrate that and allow men an opportunity to celebrate their masculinity as well.
Now, before your first child was born,
Yeah.
your first son was born, did you have some of the same anxieties that we had from Joseph?
Oh man, yeah. I mean,
Did you search out for advice on
on
how I
all
can
kinds
be a
of
great father?
things. Yeah, even the birth process with my wife, she wanted a natural birth and didn't want to go to the hospital, and I wanted me to deliver our child. You know, that going through that like surrendering type of surrender, and realizing that, okay, you know, this is natural, this is her body, she's in control of this. The best way that I can show up for her is to just be that anchor and to hold on to that, to hold on to whatever she needs me to.
You know, Joseph, do you guys talk about fatherhood at Men IQ?
All the time.
Talk to me about those conversations.
So actually, that's our first panel. Our first panel began around fatherhood in 2021 because we knew it's one of those rites of passage that most men are going to go through. Not every man will get married. Not every, particularly in the communities I serve, and not every man will go through graduation or the collegiate experience, but there's a rites of passage going from boyhood to manhood that can be very unclear, right? Like, does it happen at 13? Like, does it happen at 21? Does it happen when someone's just like, hey, man, you got to get out the house, you know, which might happen at 16. But that rites of passage from I'm a single man to whether I'm married or not, I'm a father is a clear rites of passage that can't be ignored, and will significantly change the trajectory of the world, the way you perceive and engage with the world. And so it's one we talk about a lot. Many of the guys that I work with may be navigating co-parent relationships, potentially even some parental alienation experiences. And so really working to get back in their children's lives or maintain a healthy relationship with their partner if they're still together, or their co-parent. And so yeah, it's like not tomorrow. We have a mental health conference starting tomorrow, going into this weekend with one of our anchor partners, the Black Mental Health Village. Amazing group. And we'll be doing one of our next panels there, and that'll be on Saturday, actually. And that panel will specifically be centered around co-parenting.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekolona. We're talking this hour about men's groups and masculinity. My guests are Joseph Bosley and Jimmy Addison. If you are part of a men's group, has it helped you? You can tweet us at This Is Nashville. Now, Joseph, you said something interesting. You talked about rites of passage.
Sure.
Right? And Jimmy, you were in other cultures, a lot of other cultures. The United States doesn't necessarily have this in the positive form. I've learned from my experience. But rites of passage does happen for a lot of young people, young males and young females at 12, 13 years old. And it's very directed to help them begin that path to adulthood. We have similar things here. When I was in Los Angeles, I experienced a lot of kids, 12, 13. That's when they're, quote unquote, initiated into gang culture and gang life. You know, what is the need for some sort of developed rites of passage system for young men, regardless of race and ethnicity, here in the United States? Jimmy, what do you think?
I think that there's room for celebration for people. I think that there's room for people to celebrate when changes are happening in their life or something big, a big life event happens. Whether that's joining a sports team for the first time, or whether that's whether that's having your first girlfriend, or whether that's meeting your wife, or whether that's having your first child and going through that. I don't think that our culture celebrates enough. By and large, I think there are a lot of, like, Jewish cultures have that rites of passage. Hispanic cultures have that, and quinceañeras and different events that they have. But I think we've got a long way to go in this country, especially with just allowing more opportunities for everyone to feel celebrated in these big rites of passages.
Let me ask you guys, what does it mean to you to be a man, Joseph?
Well, I was going to say, I did a rites of passage actually growing up.
Okay.
Back in New York. It was called I Am My Brother. the I My Brother program with Ife Tayo Cultural Arts Center, and I think that helped me understand not just being a man, but being a Pan-African man, that I had a commitment and a responsibility to my community always. I had identity that wasn't enough to just walk out, but to be aware, to be conscious, right? Going to Fisk, we learn about double consciousness, which is a concept W.E.B. Du Bois developed in Tunis, and understanding that there are times that even though we understand our experience of the world is one way, and I guess they call it code switching now, but can be one way. It may not be necessary for me to be Black Panther Joe when I go to military training, basic training, right? Even though I'm always gonna be Black Panther Joe, and anybody that know me, I'm gonna stand up for the values and the principles I live in. I don't also have to be an evangelist of that when I'm at basic training, because I'm there for a different purpose, right? And so rites of passage is understanding who you are. And as a man, that's something we all have to come into alignment with, right? We do a deep dive into knowledge of self, right? Introspection and mission statements. But I'll just give to you one of my good brothers, Qasim Bagani, will always say, men, we have to at least adopt the 4 Ps if we're gonna show up for our family. I'm like, what are your 4 Ps, bro? He's like, definitely to show up and protect our community. But whether you are the breadwinner or not, you still got to provide something. You have to bring. You're not gonna go out and not bring something home and just expect to eat and just expect to live off of the what others could bring to the table. He says something a lot about preach, and I didn't gravitate toward that initially, but he's just saying, whatever ideologies you stand for, don't be afraid to speak up for it, right? A man that stands for nothing can fall for anything type thing. And then he says preside. And I love that preside element, because sometimes we think just doing it and providing is enough. But we all know the struggles of young people that grow up in homes where my father provided a lot of resources, or our parents, but they were never around.
Yeah.
They weren't at my games. They weren't at my shows. Yeah. And so when I was looking for wisdom, I really was, blind leading the blind, learning through social media, learning through TV. And so, at least, I don't presume to say what it means to be a man, but I do like some of the things we've talked about in our groups, and the 4 Ps rather, are the ones that come up to mind right now.
What y'all were saying to me, it kind of reminds me of the adage of men keeping it to ourselves, but you all are both working with men to express how you're feeling. No matter what you're feeling, you're expressing that freely in a safe environment, which is very, very key for mental health. Why is that important to your group, Jimmy?
It's so important to allow men a space to express their vulnerability. Yes. I feel we hold it in, a lot of times, and because we don't feel like we'll be accepted, or we feel as though we have to protect our family, ourselves.
Or maybe we'll be seen as being weak.
Yeah, exactly. But when you allow a space to open up where where you don't cross-talk people, you don't, you allow people to be who they are and express themselves, and literally just listen to them, just hold space and listen to whatever's coming up for them as a man, you'd be amazed at just the impact that has on them personally in their lives, in their interpersonal lives, in their family lives. It's just so incredible, these stories that I hear, people coming back, being like, last month really meant something to my family.
What can people do who are listening? How can they hold space for the men in their lives? What can they do? I'd love to hear suggestions from both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's self-awareness and active listening. It's really active listening. It's making direct eye contact with somebody, not having your own agenda, and just really listening to what's on a person's heart and soul. It can be uncomfortable for people, that dead air, that space, whatever that is, but just allow somebody to be themselves and see them for who they are. Mm-hmm. I think that goes whether you're talking about masculinity or whether, you're, talking about femininity. It doesn't.
Humans.
We're humans. Yeah. It's listening to the human condition without judgment, and trying to understand where a person's coming from and just absorbing it.
Yeah, in this case, we're talking about groups for cis hetero men, but it could be anybody.
Could be anybody.
Yeah.
Joseph?
I love that. I'd also, just to put some easy, tangible things for people, they call it third spaces. So getting out of the home and the work, but like going into a park or going for a walk. Spaces where you can open up conversation and dialogue, and there's not an agenda. I also would say I found my guys, self-included, right? Even myself, we tend to feel more comfortable being vulnerable after folks have been vulnerable with us, right? And so coming in just like, so what's going on with you? Like when they feel like the project, when they feel like the problem, like, you're probably going to get a very masked response versus when we're all just talking and sharing what's going on in our own journey, and they feel like they're part of a community being vulnerable. Like, you don't have to ask them to open up at that point. They're going to naturally do and move in kind with the group.
How can, I understand this is what's happening within men and the groups that you're with, right? And conversations you're having with yourselves. But sometimes society has these expectations of men that are toxic and not right. How can people shift their own thinking when it comes to dealing with the men in their lives, because they have this expectation of you being tough and you being this kind of barbaric provider, and that's how they approach you? What can they do? What can other people do to change themselves to be better, to be of better service and help to the men in their lives?
Yeah, I don't mind opening up with this. So I've been making like some acknowledgments of some influences in my life, because I wouldn't be anything and anyone without the people and the community that has allowed me to grow. So when you say that, nationally, there's a good brother I really look up to and listen to a lot named Jason Wilson, and has a really powerful A Cave of Adula movement. And he's just talking to men about getting out of the bravado, the grind culture, all the things that are...
Stop being hard.
But like when we celebrate and elevate those voices and those narratives versus, a lot of times, and I was talking this, we had a men's meeting last night. So a lot of times we don't even get respected or valued if we're not angry, if we're not aggressive. Our women like, man, he's soft, and that's perpetuated. I remember growing up, it's funny you said being indoctrinated into gangs. I used to love like some great music, and I think there was a song like I Need a Soldier, like I need a hood. Like there's a lot of music, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of music that invalidates anyone that's less than a certain level of bravado. And so I think when we celebrate and honor those narratives that don't reflect the traditional, the hyper-masculine, and we open up space, we take it into our work, our music, or whatever we do, that becomes a new paradigm, that becomes a new zeitgeist.
That's a problem. Yeah, Jimmy, real quick before we go.
Yeah, I just want to say it's the spirit of inclusion, really. I think we have a really long way to go. I think there can be a lot more inclusion and diversity in our men's groups. And I think that in addition to that, your personal experience, just really having an anchored sense of self-awareness and acting in integrity with yourself, showing up in integrity and honoring yourself in community is so incredibly important.
I want to thank you both for being here. My guests are Joseph Bosley, the founder of Men IQ, and Jimmy Addison, who's a men's coach and organizer of Conscious Men's Circle Nashville. Again, thank you both for being here in this conversation. It's not a conversation that comes on air a lot of times, so I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khalil.
We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll look at men's groups that offer support in a non-traditional way. Are you a man? What ways do you find support? You can tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. Men's groups provide a positive environment for men to gather and discuss what is going on in their lives. Before the break, we heard about 2 groups that help men talk through things like mental health, relationships, and what it means to be a man. But there are other opportunities for men to get together and to find brotherhood and connection. My next guest helps to make that happen. Emmanuel LeGrare is the founder of The Commonwealth, a men's group all about style. And Stacy Brown is co-pastor at Greater Nashville Church. Emmanuel, Stacy, thank you both for being here. Welcome to This is Nashville.
Thank you. It's excellent being here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Now, Manny, your group, The Commonwealth, is based around style, which is pretty unusual, but also very cool.
Yes.
How did you decide to form a group like this?
Well, it was based out of a need that I had, and I just kind of figured that others would have the same need. You know, when I came out of grad school in 2015 here in Nashville, I went to Vanderbilt. I started to create a personal brand for myself in the city through blogging and Instagramming and influencing and whatnot. And I got invited to these events, and they were great. They were well executed. I met tons of amazing people, but a lot of them were women's focused. And so I said, you know, as pretty as this is, I don't need a braid bar. I have no hair, you know, or I keep my hair cropped short, you know, and as great as they were, I just felt like there was a gap in the market for men who were interested in style and, you know, tastings and previews and all these other things that a lot of the women were getting almost exclusive access to. And so I felt the need to kind of do that on my own. And that's where it came from. But also in that my interests were in fashion and style, and being in spaces where I felt welcomed was not something that I had come across often. And so giving that space to men, it was important to me as well.
Describe what some of the gatherings are like. I know everybody looks good.
Yeah, I hope so. So the gatherings come in a couple different forms, you know. So we do cocktail hours, happy hours, if you will. I've done panel discussions. I've done workshops where people come and make things. So they vary, and it kind of is contingent on or malleable based on where it is. So if it's in a hotel, it's going to look different if it's in someone's boutique. And it's going to look different if it's in someone's house, you know. So another tenet of the events is to be found in spaces that are not normal where you would find an event typically. So it's a really good time, and the gentlemen really love it, and I love putting it on for them.
Now, Stacy, I understand you're relatively new to Nashville, right?
That's right.
How long have you been here?
January 1 of 2022.
Okay.
So 18 months.
Yeah.
Going on 19.
Well, so what were some of the needs you observed that led you to start men's gatherings?
Well, it's interesting. So one of the churches that I helped to lead back in Atlanta, I saw the need there. You know, typically, men, we don't naturally do things, if you will, to congregate outside of anything that we deem necessary. So, for instance, in an ecclesial space, outside of maybe going to a church service or a meeting of some sort, men may not necessarily do that.
Except for going to check out the game or something together.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Right. So it started with me during a particular time, doing some personal devotions and kind of daily readings. I came across a couple of scriptures, both of them being in the Old Testament. And of course, we know a lot of that has, Jewish influence and that kind of thing. But it talked about the men getting together 3 times a year, and it was something that God commanded. Mm-hmm. And so, and these were centered around the festivals. Like for instance, in Exodus, when it was first mentioned, it says 3 times a year all your men are to appear before the sovereign Lord, the God of Israel. I will drive out nations before you and enlarge your territory. When you come before the Lord 3 times a year to appear before him. And so for me, I saw this opportunity of a scriptural basis to help men get together. And so what I found most successful in terms of just organizing and executing certain things, a a lot of times we like to go by quarters. I've found that trimesters seem to work better. Usually when you go by quarters, even when you have something planned, it kind of just sneaks up on you quicker than you anticipate. Yeah. And then you end up pushing it out another month or so anyway. And so I subdivide the year into trimesters. And so first trimester, I would make sure the men got together. Second trimester and third trimester. So that first trimester would be like January through April.
What's the significance, Stacey, of having the group involve men of faith? And how does faith inform your idea of manhood?
So it's interesting because in one of the other references in Deuteronomy 16, it talks about, and it's relative even to the gentleman that you previously had in here. One of the P's, like being providers, making provision, and so in the Deuteronomy portion where that command is re-given, it talks about how the Lord, your God, will bless you in all your harvest and the work of your hands, and your joy will be complete. Then 3 times a year, all of your men are to appear before the Lord. And so what it does is it allows us to be able to get together and to recognize that in all of the things that we've done, because a lot of times, we can just simply reduce what we're able to produce and able to acquire just on our own, and not always understanding or even believing that there is divine intervention and sometimes, supernatural interventions that happens that allows us to be able to do that. And so it allows us to draw gravity and create attention towards God, towards that higher power. It helps to really understand faith. And when it even says all of the men, these gatherings that I have, it's not just exclusive to someone like, you or I, who seem to be in the same age demographic or in the same socioeconomic demographic,
It's all the males.
It's all of the males.
Little babies to old men.
Absolutely. So, the men get to be without excuses like, I got to stay home and watch my 10-month-old son. No, we'll bring him.
Bring him.
Well, I had 3 kids. Well, bring them. Uh-huh. That's the lovely part of the atmosphere that we've created. And you would be amazed to see how the men gravitate towards all of the younger ones that come. I even had one young man, he brought his daughter to the men's gathering, and her presence was just amazing. Mm-hmm. She was like 7 or 8 years old. And the things that she had to input, because these gatherings are not just didactic, and directed by me only, where it's just my voice. These are facilitated so people get to participate on varying levels and provide, transference and counter-transference really is great.
That's awesome. Now, Manny, I'm thinking about like style and stuff. There's expectations for what men can wear, what men are supposed to wear, how they're supposed to be. How do you all kind of defy that, yet at the same time maintain a firm grasp of your expression of masculinity?
I think it just boils down to people feeling comfortable with who they are, and that's something that we try to promote in the events. So many times when people want to come for the first time, they'll ask me, what should I wear? What should I have on? I'm like, whatever makes you feel confident and good and you stepping out in, like, just put it on. I have guys that come in 3-piece suits, and I have guys that come in a baseball cap and a vintage tee and nice jeans. So it kind of runs the full gambit. So it really, for me, is a matter of comfort level for the gentlemen that come. I want them to feel comfortable, accepted, and confident in what they're doing.
They say a lot, the old saying, real men wear pink,
I'm here for it.
Yeah, so am I.
I love wearing pink.
One of my favorite colors to wear all the time. All right, Manny, how have you seen the connections of members of the group grow? How have friendships developed?
Firstly, I'll say they have definitely developed. I have come into communication and contact with folks that I would not have met otherwise had I not gathered them together myself. And so I think on the outside of myself, collaborations have happened in other businesses, and we get makers together. So they've worked together and met on other fronts. Friendships, honest, good friendships have formed. I have a couple friends to this day who started coming to my events, and they're really good friends of mine. I've met their families, spent time with their wives and kids. It's been a full thing. So it's been gratifying to watch that on the back end as well. It's definitely happening for sure.
I'm wondering about the diversity of the groups. How important is that for you both to have a diverse group here of men? Because at the end of the day, men are men, even though there may be some cultural differences between the Hispanic community, Caucasian community, African-American community, Asian community, and things. We're still men in America.
Yeah, for sure.
How important is that to have a diverse group for you, Stacey?
It's very important. As I believe it reflects, number one, a lot of scriptural tenets and themes that we see throughout the holy text, throughout the Bible in general. I believe it embodies, what Jesus talked about in terms of the Great Commission, making disciples of all nations. It's reflective of, of all of those different things. And so that diversity is important, and it's amazing because in the specific church that I help lead and co-pastor here, we are a very diverse congregation. So I would put it demographically probably at about 60, maybe 60. Yeah, about 60% white and maybe 35 African American. And then the remaining would be a toss-up between our Latin community and Asian community.
Are the men comfortable sharing parts of their culture with each other during the gatherings?
I believe so. I believe that's been a great. I believe that's been a foundation that's been established even before I've come. I believe that what I've been able to do is just accentuate the opportunities and to create deeper opportunities for that to happen in those gatherings. And so, again, when you talk about diversity, you better believe, like in our church, we will have people of different political affiliations, right? Those things bring very high tensions right now. Of course, we have people who work for McDonald's, maybe doing fries, and we have people who are multimillionaires, who are at our church. And so, it's so wide, but when the men come together and they're able to center under a spiritual atmosphere and to be guided, amazing things happen. I remember, even speaking of the, social and political things, I remember in one of the men's gatherings, we did this prayer at Love Circle at the top of Nashville. And so there was a particular part where, where I facilitated like some confession and repentance and that kind of thing. And so one of the gentlemen came up to me, and afterwards he said, "Hey, I haven't seen," it was an African-American man. He said, "I haven't seen this particular guy who was white in a while, and we haven't spoken because we had some pretty tense words, and all of this was like centered around some of the George Floyd and those things during the pandemic." And so he goes, "But when you did, you helped to facilitate this part for us to be open and to confess and to make amends." He said, "This is the first time I've talked to that person in years."
Wow.
And now things are on a great track.
Yeah. Finding ways to forge bonds, find forgiveness, and ask for forgiveness. I really appreciate you both being here. Thank you both for being a part of this conversation. Emmanuel Legrere is the founder of The Commonwealth, a men's group based around style. He was joined by Stacey Brown, co-pastor at Greater Nashville Church. Again, thanks to you both for being here.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Magnolia McKay. Our senior producer is Steve Haruch. Michaela Elias is our technical director, and our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. The masterminds behind our theme music are Laurent and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Jaffe Judah. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekalona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.